You'll see. Sarah and Lauren had been friends for years. They were students at the nearby high school and were supposed to go to the school basketball game that night. Lauren didn't have a car, so every day after school her parents would pick her up on their way home in the old van they drove. That night, Sarah offered to give Lauren a ride to the game after her parents took her home. "I'll pick you up at 6, Sarah had told her. It was a long drive to Lauren's house, but Sarah didn't mind. Lauren lived on the outskirts of town, so traffic was never a problem. She drove until she saw the long gravel road that she knew Lauren's house was on. The sun was just starting to disappear over the horizon when she thought she saw someone walking along the road in the distance. As Sarah got closer, she realized it was Lauren. "Hey, what are you doing?" Sarah shouted through the window as she pulled up alongside. "I thought you might leave early," Lauren said. "Me and my parents had a huge fight." "Well, get in," Sarah said. "We're late for the game." "Can you take me to my house first?" Lauren said. "I need to show you something." "Okay," Sarah said, "but we have to hurry." They drove a little further down the road until they saw the lights from Lauren's house far in the distance. "So what did you need to show me?" Sarah asked as they drove. "You'll see," said Lauren. They pulled up alongside Lauren's mailbox. Lauren's house was the only one for miles. "Here we are," Sarah said as they parked along the road. Lauren abruptly opened the car door, got out, and walked down the road without saying a word until she disappeared over the next small hill. Sarah stared in amazement. She waited a minute or two for Lauren to come back, thinking this was some sort of practical joke, but when Lauren didn't return, she began to wonder. The road up ahead was riddled with potholes, so Sarah decided to get out and follow where Lauren had gone on foot. "Lauren, what are you doing?" Sarah called to her as she walked. There was no answer, but Sarah thought she smelled smoke coming from over the next hill. As she got up over the hill, she saw the crumpled wreckage of Lauren's parents' van, nose down in a deep ravine off the side of the road. Smoke was billowing from the hood, and parts of the car were still on fire. Sarah walked closer, only to see what looked like Lauren and her parents trapped inside. But no one was moving. Sarah put her hand over her mouth and slowly began backing away when suddenly she felt someone grab her shoulder. She turned and saw Lauren standing behind her. Lauren smiled softly at her, then she vanished. I dare you. The students were at a party at a friend's house. It was a pretty big party, but after most people had gone home for the night, the small group that was left decided to play the old game, Truth or Dare. The game was pretty boring, as most people would just say truth when it got to be their turn. But one boy, Tim Garfield, was always the first one to pick Dare. "All right, Timmy," another boy said. "I dare you to go to the old high school tonight. Go to the top floor and stay there for an hour." That made Tim nervous. That high school had been abandoned for years, and some people even said it was haunted because a teacher had fallen down the stairs and died several years ago. "How about just a half hour?" Tim said. "Deal," the boy replied. They all drove down to the old school together and gave Tim a flashlight. "If you see any spooks," they told him, laughing, "yell down to us." Tim slowly walked up to the front door of the school. He swallowed hard, then opened the door. It was dark and damp in there, with cobwebs all over the place. It had a moldy smell that made Tim gag a little bit. As instructed, he walked up the old wooden staircase until he got all the way to the top floor. The top floor was just a long hallway with lockers and classrooms on each side of the walls. Tim just stood on one end of the hallway, staring down at the other end. It was as dark and still as a tomb up there, with the wind whistling through the cracks in the windows. He stood there and looked at his watch, praying that the half-hour would go by quickly. Suddenly, Tim heard what sounded like a door opening to one of the classrooms all the way down the hall. He stood there for a moment, waiting for anything to happen. Then, Tim heard footsteps coming from inside the classroom where the door had opened. Step, step, step. Slowly, something that looked like a woman stepped out of the doorway and into the hall. She turned and stared at Tim. Tim could tell by the way she was dressed that she was a teacher, but her arms were jerking around as if they were broken, and her head bobbed slowly from side to side. Tim knew that he was looking at a ghost. Suddenly, the ghost began lurching towards him. Tim turned and ran back down the stairs, but in his terror, he tripped and fell the rest of the way. Tim's ankle was hurt, and he realized he couldn't run anymore. He quickly went inside one of the nearby classrooms and hid underneath an old teacher's desk. For a moment, everything was quiet. But then the door to the classroom slowly creaked open. Tim could hear the ghost's footsteps enter the room. Step, step, step. They slowly made their way over towards the desk. Step, step, step. Tim listened quietly, shaking with fear as the footsteps walked around the desk. Step, step, step. Then they stopped. Tim waited for a moment. Then he slowly looked up and...
If you enjoyed listening to those but wanted to experience reading the stories for yourself, you should check out the link in the description because we have an Etsy page and David's book is on there. Now, in addition to all of his short stories and poems, this book also features some incredible artwork, so check it out.